Video games with the goal to kill, often with a firearm like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, are among the most popular video games played by American teenagers. However, violent video games are quickly blamed to contribute to violence in real life, such as mass shootings.
The world has witnessed an explosion of new video games in this decade. Along with the development of technology, video games have become more realistic than ever before, with buildings, human models, weapons, etc.
We can easily fight a game with violent content, such as killing others player by guns or knives. But the question is, do violent video games increase aggressions in players? Do violent video games actually lead to violent behaviors in general? And you will find it out in this episode. You are watching IFO News.
Welcome back to IFO News. We are Nhật Quang
and Thu Dương.
Amid the social unrest in the past few weeks regarding to the death of George Floyd, we have been talking about the violently policing culture against colored people, particularly against black people in America, and there is an urgent need to address racism in law enforcement. But fixing the system problems of policing should also mean reforming the gun laws.
Exactly. Although the gun was not used to kill George Floyd, it would be a mistake to try to resolve the problems with police behavior without acknowledging and addressing America's epidemic of gun violence. Police reform and gun reform go hand in hand. Why, you might ask?
Because black people are 3 times more likely to be killed and brutalized by police who execute the violence by using guns. And not just black people, immigrants and people of color are under attack. The mass shootings in El Paso in 2019, which has been described as the deadliest attack on Latinos in modern American history, exemplifies the issue with gun violence.
Gun violence has always been a thorny issue in American politics. The gun control debate has always been intensively partitioned, divided between the Republicans and the Democrats, that has impeded the development of any real solutions.
However, when talking about gun violence, interestingly, video games, particularly the violent ones, have been consistently blamed as a major catalyst leading to aggressive behavior and mass shootings.
We have become significantly desensitized to death and to violence. And we are training children, whether we intend to or not, whether it's anyone's desire or not, through video games, through movies, through musical lyrics, through television shows. Increasingly during prime time even, the amount of violence is increasingly realistic, increasingly graphic, and there is a cost to this.
Most children and adolescents play video games. I also play many video games. I can say I'm quite a gaming geek. But let's go back to the story of video games and its connection to aggression in players. According to research published by Psychology of Popular Media Culture in July 2015, 67% of parents and 90% of pediatricians surveyed agree that violent video games can increase aggressive behavior in children and adolescents.
And in light of the increasing of young criminals, people frequently believe that violent games are the main reason. The American Psychological Association's APA considers violent video games a risk factor for aggressions. In 2017, they concluded that video game exposure was linked to increased aggressive behaviors, thoughts, and emotions, as well as decreased empathy. However, it is not clear whether violent video game exposure was linked to criminality or delinquency. There is long-standing debate over whether violence depicted in video games can trigger real-world violence.
Large-scale analysis of violent crime and violent video games have found no evidence that increased sales of violent video games leads to a spike in violent crimes. Researchers make the case that if violent games directly led to the violent behavior, the data would show an increase in violent crime on a large scale as more people play violent games. In fact, looking at the whole picture, While the sales of violent video games have been increasing for the last 20 years, the rate of violent crime overall, and especially by juveniles, has been falling steadily for that period of time.
Focusing on violent video games as a cause of violent behaviors is just a political strategy, often argued by the Republicans to distract legislators and government officials from the pressing need to deal with more fundamental causes, which is stricter and stricter gun control policy.
The United States has the highest number of guns per capita worldwide, over 1 gun per person. America has a strong right to keep and bear arms for people to possess weapons legally, established firmly in the American Constitution, the Second Amendment. However, it is hard to change a constitution, and debates over stricter gun control policies often reach an impasse. Gun ownership is most common among white men compared to other races and genders. These are men who are anxious about their ability to protect their families, insecure about their place in the job market, and beset by racial fears.
I also think that social norms and media bias play a substantial role when it comes to blaming violent games for aggressive action in youngsters, particularly children. Parents are afraid that the exposure to violent media, which includes violent games and violent movies, will make the children more likely to behave aggressively. However, I would argue that parents have completely control over the consumption of violent media of their children. Parents should take part in guiding their children how to play video games in a suitable way, just like my father, who played a lot of video games with me when I was a kid. He taught me how to control myself and not being addicted to the gaming.
As I said earlier, police reform and gun reform go hand in hand. Reducing the easy availability of guns might not eliminate the problems with policing in America, nor in unwarranted killings, but it would definitely help. And condemning violent video games that dehumanize individuals and make them aggressive or even murderous is just one of the tactics that candidates use for their presidential election.
Exactly. There is no link between violent games and violent behavior. And looking at the bright side, some violent games have their own official tournaments, such as Counter-Strike Global Offensive, where the total prize pool of the major is $1 million. And I myself compete in a university tournament for CSGO when I was a student. And personally, I really hope that one day I can see the Vietnamese players raise our national flag on the stage of the major, same as the way the French or the Brazilian or the Sweden did.
And that's the end of this episode. See you next week.
Bye for now.